Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. You're going to listen to an interview with Sallie Calhoun, an impact investor who has been active in the regenerative agriculture space for over 15 years. We will be talking about some new initiatives she's been active in, trying to get investors and funders to consider soil health in every investment or grant they make, for instance. But also a new type of vineyard they are developing where sheep will do most of the management, except for harvesting. And we discuss the barriers for impact investors to get active in this space. The current investment model isn't made for long-term investment in the real economy, which makes investing in regenerative agriculture, which needs a long-term view, using the traditional investment methods, a constant challenge. Enjoy! Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the Planet Mattered, a podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. Before we get started, I've been recording these interviews next to my day job, and I will definitely continue to do so and release about an episode a month. But at the same time, I would love to take this further, share more interviews. There are many more stories to share on investing in regenerative food and agriculture. More depth, improve the quality, maybe even doing some video series. So I started a Patreon community, which makes it easy to support creators like myself. If these podcasts have been of value to you, and if you have the means, I invite you to support me and make this happen. For more information, please find the link to my Patreon account in the description below. And now, without further ado, the interview. Enjoy! So welcome to Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Agriculture as if the Planet Mattered. I'm Koen van Seijen, the host of today. In the podcast of today, we have Sallie Calhoun, who has been active in investing in regenerative agriculture for over 15 years, both on her own farm and in the rest of the US. And I'm very eager to find out more about her latest projects. For instance, mixing vineyards and sheep. Welcome, Sallie.
Thank you very much.
So to start with a personal question, why are you active in this space? You, after a successful career, bought a farm and you could have stopped at that, but you didn't.
Yes, and I really tried to stop at that. I love spending my time with farmers and ranchers and out on the land, and that's what I personally want to do. But I became more and more uncomfortable first about what the rest of my money was doing to the world, and the idea that it was potentially doing very bad things, and I was not thinking about it. So I sort of felt compelled to start to take that journey of where is the money and what is it doing. And then the reason I've decided to do most of the investing in regenerative agriculture is, to me, that was the answer of how to still spend time doing the things I'm interested in with the people I find interesting, i.e. mostly farmers and ranchers, but putting money to work at the same time. So it was a way of blending the two things. I'm not interested in doing impact investing where you end up going around talking to financial advisors and looking at spreadsheets about SRI and ESG. So I had to find a way of doing investing that was joyful and fun, and I was willing to spend time at it. And this is what I've come up with.
And what was your first step outside the farm when you made that decision to be active also with the rest of your portfolio? How did you start? Where was the first initial sprout or seed planted to go on that journey?
Well, actually, my first two adventures in this were loans. One was actually to a friend who had a ranch in Wyoming, who happened to call me one day and tell me that his two partners wanted to develop housing on the ranch and wanted to sell it out from under him. And so my very first foray here was to make a loan to that rancher so that he could take out his two partners, put a conservation easement on his ranch, stop the development, and then sell it and move on. So that was really, and I didn't really intend to be an impact investor, but that was sort of the first step. And then the second was I'd been in contact with Don Schaefer at RSF Social Finance, and he knew I was interested in the space. And he connected me with a young woman who was running a CSA very near my ranch, who I had never met. And she was getting ready to shut down her company because she couldn't find a very small amount of financing to take the next step and hire someone. And he put us in touch, and we ended up talking, and she asked me to make an equity investment. And I said, no, I don't really want to do that, but I will do a small patient capital loan. So I just sort of started inching in that way. And I've now been working with her for the last 11 years on a variety of projects. So that was kind of my starting point.
And after, because I've seen that from some other impact investors, they start making investments because things come across their path. When was the moment you thought, okay, let's think about it a bit more strategically, let's come up with a structure, or let's come up with maybe even a strategy? Was there a specific moment that triggered that?
Well, that was about 5 years ago. I attended this meeting called Play Big, which is put on around moving capital toward local investing, really sort of activating your whole portfolio around purpose. And that was the point when I really started thinking about doing things more strategically and at larger scale. And my first thought was I'll just go find a financial advisor who's into this and hand that person the money and it will all be fine. But I realized, as do most impact investors, that infrastructure for doing a lot of interesting things doesn't really exist. So it took me a couple of years after that to wrap my head around the fact that I was going to have to build an infrastructure and a team and do more of the strategic thinking myself rather than just being able to outsource that in a way that made sense to me and seemed really impactful in the areas that I care about. So it's been in the last 3 years or so that I've really started to work much harder at it and to do a lot more moving of the money.
And are you still able to spend enough time on the land talking to the people you find inspiring?
Yes.
Or more and more with financial advisors?
No, I never speak to financial advisors. I work with a woman named Esther Park who runs our investment firm, and I'm afraid that I make her do most of that needs to happen. Though I'm always happy to go talk to investors, though, if I can talk about regenerative agriculture and soil health. So I will take that opportunity to go and meet with those people, but I don't spend a lot of time. I have a personal goal to spend as little time as possible under fluorescent lights, especially in hotels. So I'm pretty able to stick with that.
I think it's a great goal. And if you look back at the last 5 or maybe even longer years, maybe it's one of the 2 investments you already mentioned or one of the 2 relationships you already mentioned. What's the one that really sticks out on impact, unexpected, the one you tell if somebody asks you, pick one, basically?
Well, so one of the most unusual investments we've made that we often share with people is actually for a food processing company in Louisville, Kentucky, that specializes in doing processed food for fast casual restaurants, which is not the kind of company that we normally really talk to at all, food in big vats in a kind of factory setting. But we met Mike, who runs this company in Louisville, and he had become totally passionate about sourcing local food there are a lot of small farmers still left in Kentucky, and a lot of people are working on how to keep those farmers in business. And he had gotten totally committed to the sourcing of local food and gotten in a position where he needed some capital or he's going to have to sell the company to a conventional food company. So he ended up making an investment in that company, and they're making a lot of school food and sourcing a lot of cabbage and squash from farmers in Kentucky. So that's probably the most unusual and unexpected investment we've made. And it sort of reflects a little bit of our theory of change. Most of the farmers that he works with are not organic. They're not really practicing regenerative practices at the moment. But part of our idea is that we need to keep more farmers on the land, because then there's the possibility of improving our practices. Whereas if farms continue to get consolidated and turned into fence row to fence row corn, it'll be much harder to go backwards. So hopefully then, as these farmers are selling into local markets, the market will drive more organic processes and more regenerative thinking. So that's one of our favorite investments.
It's very interesting. And if you look at, have you made more investments in this line of thinking of theories of change, where you invested in basically a processing company or somebody that aggregates from many small farmers to keep them on the land and hopefully in the future move the whole group at once, or at least as a group, to regenerative agriculture? Is that something of a theme for you?
Yes, I think it is actually, like particularly in local and pastured meats. We work with a couple of people, a woman in Kansas who aggregates lamb from a variety of producers, and then a young man in Arkansas who has started a group of 14 producers, and they're aggregating a whole variety of pastured meats and selling throughout Arkansas. So, I mean, it turns out a lot of small farmers and ranchers, this direct marketing, which a lot of people have tried, takes a tremendous amount of time and energy and a skill set that a lot of people don't have. So we are definitely working at supporting the people who are aggregating for those producers, because we think that's right now that seems to be the best way to get these kind of products to market and still maintain some revenue for the producers, who are generally the guys who kind of get squeezed out of the financial picture.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had exactly the same conversation with a group of people doing the same in Southern Africa, and saying that the processing is where if you can keep the processing locally, you can add a lot of value, pay farmers a much fairer share, and start moving on regenerative agriculture. So it's interesting to see on both sides of the ocean, basically the same movement coming up. And I think here in Europe, actually, it's exactly the same. We need aggregate, and not everybody can and should be selling directly on farmers markets because there's just no space for that.
Right, and it's crazy hard work to do that. But of course, at the same time, we are also working with larger farmers in the Midwest who have completely different distribution channels. But they need sort of different kinds of investment. So
yeah, different types of money, different horizons, different payback schemes, and it's a whole different approach.
Right. So one of the investments we've made is in Montana, and it was a loan. We were part of a group that did a loan to a processing facility for lentils and peas. We're very interested in those because if we can monetize cover crops and turn them into cash crops, we can hopefully accelerate the transition to cover cropping. So that's another processing facility that works generally with larger farmers, but it's the same idea.
Yeah, and it has an added benefit of being a cover crop. Yeah, no, definitely.
Right.
And if you look at we're now February 2017. If you look a year ago up till now, what were the things you were most occupied and busy with work-wise, and what kept you up at night? What have you been working on and you're most proud of? What was the year like?
Well, that's an interesting question. I was thinking about that before our call. I guess the thing we've been working on is we've launched something called our No Regrets Initiative, and we are putting up a website and starting a campaign to educate investors and philanthropists around soil health, particularly those people who are already working in sustainable agriculture. Our feeling is that a lot of people are not up to the latest science on soil health and don't really understand the importance of it and the possibility of it in terms of how it can address a lot of the issues that we're facing, including climate change. So we've been working on this effort, which is something completely out of my comfort zone and something really new for us to do, to communicate this and create a community of investors and philanthropists who are educated in this and working on this. And we're starting to get people ask us questions like, so where's the soil health investing conference? And we're like, oh, there isn't one. But so one of the things we're struggling with is how much time and outreach we want to spend on this education piece and how much we want to spend on doing our own direct investing. So I guess that's been part of the tension over the last year. We expect the website will launch in the next couple of months. We're working on partner relationships and a whole new thing for us. And I have no idea whether anyone is going to care or how well it's going to work out or how effective it will be in moving more money into the space, or really just changing the way money is used in the space. We're really asking people to just consider soil health when they make their both philanthropic grants and their investments.
I would be surprised if there would be very little interest, especially if people are already asking, where's the conference? But I understand the tension between the field building, and not the field as your own field, but the field building and, of course, your core activity,
yes,
which is making these investments and also running the farm. So I understand. But it's nice to do something out of your comfort zone and being pushed while still maintaining the same vision.
Yes, it's interesting, and we've gotten to work with some completely different, new, and amazing people. So that part is really fun.
And I guess that will also be an important part for the next few months to get that launched and see where that's going. Is that something that's the main thing for the next months, or is there something else project-wise or farm-wise that really
will keep your attention?
So that's certainly the main thing on the investing side. And we are at a really interesting time on the farm side because we've started to actually do some of this more complex farming that we've been talking about and thinking about doing. And this is the first year when we're going to really start to see whether from a financial standpoint we can make it work and make it make sense, and also to understand what the transition is going to be from heavily tilled annual row crop ground to a system that is more forage crops, animals, and more perennial plants. So we're in the midst of this big transition on the ground here at the ranch, and it's all still very theoretical, and this is the year where it starts to get a little less theoretical. And we really get to see what's going to happen as we make that transition. This is also the year we plant our vineyard with the sheep in it. So it's an exciting year on the ground too for us.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about that, the vineyard, of course, but also about this transition. Where is it coming from, and why this transition? Plus, what are the first steps you're already made and are making this year?
Well, so we have about 550 acres of irrigated row crop ground that has been leased out for between 9 and 12 years to a certified organic grower. And the more I've learned about soil health and what it takes to have healthy soil, the more apparent it's been that this method of farming is taking soil in an opposite direction. There's just a tremendous amount of tillage over and over and over again, which is pretty standard with annual organic production. So I just sort of felt compelled to basically, as those leases ended, we are going to start farming that row crop ground, which is something that I swore that I would never do. And what we're doing is we're starting from the beginning. We're planting a really diverse set of forage crops, which also act as cover crops. And we will immediately be grazing with both sheep and cattle on that land. And the question in our mind is to see how the soil changes with that combination of, it'll always be covered in green crops. It'll be grazed numerous times a year, very intensively and well managed. And just how quickly can we turn that soil biology around and increase carbon sequestration? And as we do that, how will productivity change? But basically, we were compelled to do it because I couldn't sit here and watch what was happening on the organic ground anymore. The vineyard is more because we think it's a really cool idea. Our ranch manager, Kelly Mulville, has come up with this idea that we could design vineyards so that they're essentially managed by sheep, which means sheep are in the vineyard all year and do almost all of the work except for harvesting. So it's a model that should really reduce irrigation water, increase yield, produce animal protein, and hopefully grow really great quality grapes. And we're trying it for the intellectual challenge. As far as we know, no one has designed a vineyard like this from the get-go. Some people have modified existing vineyards to have sheep in them all year, but this is the first one we know of that's designed from scratch. And then the sort of audacious goal there is that it's likely that a lot of California vineyards are going to need to be replanted as a result of climate change. So if there's a different model for vineyard planting, it might actually have some impact in California over the next 20 or 25 years if that replanting really has to happen.
Yeah, and of course it's nice to have a working example by the time a lot of the vineyard owners and the wine estate owners are pushed to switch.
Right.
That they can point at something. Look, we have experience. We've been doing it for a while. It's working. These are the lessons. Please copy and please do it as well.
Right. See what you think or adapt it in some way. Right. So we need we'll be about 8 years in before we really figure out what the quality of the grapes is going to be. So, right. So it'll take us a decade probably to say, look, we did this. And not only are these the financial numbers that are really compelling, but the quality is really good too. So that's how we hope it turns out. We'll let you know in 10 years or so.
Yeah, we need to taste that. and actually on the organic always tilled land, are you going to share data on that, like the soil, the carbon levels in the soil, how it's going to respond to that? Because I think a lot of people would be very interested to follow that transition and that almost revolution on the land from one day to the next, completely a different regime.
Yeah, that is exactly our intention. And it's actually, we've run into a problem there, and that is that we have been unable to find academic researchers who are interested in doing that kind of research, even if you provide funding. We just this morning did receive a proposal from Point Blue Conservation, which is a nonprofit in California, which is doing a lot of monitoring on rangelands around biodiversity and soil health. And so we hope we're going to be able to work with them to monitor this transition process. But sort of a frustration is what we found on the academic side is academic researchers don't really like to go out and keep track of what farmers and ranchers are doing and publish those results. They like to design a trial with a hypothesis on small plots of land and do the same thing for 3 years and then publish a result. And it's really surprised us how difficult it's been to figure out how to track what's happening on this land as we go through this transition, because it's a really important part of it to us, because we think it could be indeed really compelling. We haven't found anyone else who's sort of immediately gone from lots of tillage to no-till with diverse cover cropping with animals. So I think it could be really important to document, but it's been a real challenge to figure out how to do that.
That is really weird. I mean, you would imagine almost this shock therapy would be extremely interesting because it's so unique and doesn't really happen very often and on this scale, that it would be, I mean, that the academic world would be all over it, or at least the organic / regenerative agriculture, soil health, academic part of it.
Yes, we thought so too. We do have a professor of agroecology at UC Davis who's going to be working on monitoring in the vineyard site. She's very interested in that, but we're about to we have a bit of a disagreement going on at the moment because she wants us to plant a conventional vineyard and till it to death.
As a control group. Yeah.
Yes, as a control, even though we are surrounded by neighbors who have said that they would be happy to have their vineyards used as control groups. So I think we're going to refuse to do that. So I guess we'll see how that relationship goes. So
I guess maybe the vineyard is more sexy than the organic tillage land. Yeah.
I think the thing about the vineyard actually that makes it easier for academics is it's a perennial system that doesn't really change, right? We're going to plant these grapevines and they're going to stay there. Whereas on the transition ground, like, well, this year we're going to do forage crops, and they were thinking of adding some shrubs and they were thinking of adding some trees. So since it's going to be transitioning and going through different kinds of systems, they have a hard time dealing with that change. Like they study only perennial systems or only annual systems. So it's a strange problem.
Which is also an issue actually with the farmers. I've noticed in the Netherlands where a friend of mine is setting up a cooperative where they actually, with a group of families, buy a small piece of land, but enough to support 200 of these families and most of their food. And they really struggle because they're setting up a mixed farm, like in the old days, but with all the latest science, soil health, etc. And they really struggle to find farmers who are able to manage even 2 types of livestock, let alone veggies, trees and everything around, because they are not trained to do that. They're trained to be very specific.
Right.
And so they actually have issues finding that, and now working with the schools to train them again, because they're setting up in their plan, I think, a few hundred of these in the next years, meaning that they need a lot of these farmers to be able to manage a mixed farm 2.0 or whatever we're going to call it.
Yes, and we're trying to hire someone right now. We're trying to figure out, we want someone with experience, yet at the same time, once they have experience, they're sort of going down this path of a particular way of farming. And we're just dealing with a lot of questions and a lot of change. So it is a dilemma.
Yeah, you almost need somebody that with the capacity to learn quickly and have almost a lean mentality and not too much experience, because you first have to like de-learn that experience before you can start, because it's such a new way of farming, or it's but such a new way now for most of the people.
I think you need to be curious and open-minded, I think.
No, it's almost a funny challenge, but it's not funny when you're trying to hire someone and you're not finding someone, of course.
No, you think it would be pretty simple. People would love and it's true that there are people who really want the opportunity, but they generally seem to have like no experience at all. Yeah,
then it would turn into a dangerously experiment. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to give them your tractor to drive? No, not yet.
And if you look at, just to come back a bit to the investing side, if you look, because you've been in this space for a bit of time, you've seen many things come and go. What do you see as the 2 biggest barriers for investing in regenerative agriculture, and how could we overcome them?
Wow. Yeah, I was thinking about that one before we started talking. I mean, certainly there are not a lot of sort of deals that are ready to go that affect the production side. It's like a lot of the deals in food are frankly around bars and juice and have exit strategies of selling out to large conglomerate food companies. So I guess we're looking for deals that more actually affect production and that hopefully keep some of the wealth in the hands of the producers and the communities in which they live. And I think that one barrier there is just that's not a way that most investments have been thought about in the last sort of 20 or 25 years with this whole globalization and financialization. So trying to go back to find deals that build wealth at the community level and change the way agriculture works has just been a challenge to find those innovative people and to figure out the best way to support them. And it might be they need technical assistance through a philanthropic grant. It might be to connect them with other people. It might be to invest in processing, which will help them move their innovative ideas forward. But those are sort of challenging because they're not really sort of set up for investors to come in at scale and to go forward. So there's that. And then I think just there's the whole issue of the American food system and all the subsidies and the crop insurance and everything targets a particular system. And to work outside of that system, you're constantly running into a whole variety of barriers, not really one, right? For one farmer, it might be crop insurance. For another, it might be regulations that are getting in the way of what they're doing. And for a third, it might be trying to compete in a market that's very subsidized on the conventional side and not helped at all by the government on the other side. So I would say that, yes, I see a lot of barriers. I'm not sure I can put my finger on one or two, but it feels like we're just trying to work in a different system. And that's just a challenge.
Yeah, and it almost, investing in regenerative agriculture almost challenges the idea we have of investing. Like you said, the last 20, 25 years, we got a very different view on investing and investing locally or globally. And it really became a system that is not very attached to or not attached at all actually to the real economy. And now we have to refigure out how to actually put money to work in the real economy while we're revolutionizing the agriculture system. Yeah, it's right. Obviously a big challenge.
Yeah, and the point Esther likes to make is that we've taken conventional agriculture, and a lot of places we've ended up degrading the system, degrading the soil, and in fact sucking people out of the system. Right. So we've taken away the human capital, and we've taken away a lot of the natural capital. But then we want to, is it realistic to solve that problem and expect to get sort of market rate returns, right, from a degraded system? We got market rate returns as in an extractive system. And it seems unlikely that we're going to be able to get those same market rate returns as we restore that system, at least at the beginning. I mean, we fully believe that once we get some distance down this path of regeneration, that returns could be better than they are in the extractive system. But that's a theory, and B, there's probably some kind of lag, and who knows how long that is. So do we have realistic return expectations in regenerative ag right now? And the answer is probably no, if we're looking for what people think of as market returns.
Yeah, I think there's a whole discussion to be made around what is market-based returns, what is risk-adjusted, and I think there are a lot of illusions there that we need to debunk. And sort of people say it's easy to make, or it seems to be easy to make money with money, which absolutely is not true, and especially not if you start looking into these kind of sectors and without a long-term view. But I think any investor should be looking almost generationally, and then you start looking at these type of systems because they make so much sense on the long term. But yeah, the 5 to 10 years, I mean, if it already takes 8 years to get up a vineyard and probably 10, then most investors, traditional investors, would already be out because they need to move a lot faster, which doesn't work in a real economy.
Right. You might say that one of the real barriers is 7 to 10 year fund lifetimes.
Based on exits. Yeah.
Yeah, that's hugely problematic if you're trying to change an agricultural system.
Yeah, and I think we in impact investing have sort of made the point, no, you can just do your traditional investing and just put some impact glasses on and you'll be fine, which the underlying issues are much bigger than that. And I think we now start to see a lot of people, or some people, looking into alternative structures. So you can, I mean, all the different types between loan loans and equity, which are much more based on how the company grows and actually working with the co-founder instead of just investing in it and hope for the best and hope for the exit to come, which usually doesn't come, and making a lot of these funds a problematic situation. So it's we have to reinvent the investing part of it and not only the agriculture part.
Right. I think, yes. And so those of us trying to invest in regenerative ag are trying to do both things at once. Because why make it easy?
Yeah. And if you look at, because you talk to investors, I imagine regularly, because I can think they reach out to you for advice. What do you tell them if somebody says, I would like to get into the regenerative agriculture space and soil health, and I would like to put my money to work? Where do you recommend them to start?
We recommend them to go back to their place and get to know people who are working in agriculture there, wherever that happens to be, and in the food system, to really go back and get to know what's happening. And the only way we know how to do it is to really recommend a deep dive. So we don't have much advice for people who like, I have this diversified portfolio and I'd like to put a little into ag. We're like, well, okay, there are these funds. Go find a fund, ask these kind of questions about the fund, and put your money there. But if you want to do direct investing or lending, our advice is you need to dive into your place and probably also join some networks of like-minded people in whatever geographic area you want to work, so that you can work together with others. And because there's an awful lot of opportunities to invest in agriculture in ways that are actually counter to what a lot of us would like to see happen. So one of our words of advice is you have to be very careful when you do invest in ag. You have to think about the long-term consequences of your investment and the consequences to the community and the farmer. So I guess our advice is get really serious about it and dive into it, which of course doesn't work for everybody. That or work with people who have done that deep dive, who you are confident are thinking about these very issues.
Yeah, which comes back to the long-term soil health, which I think is the central theme.
Yes, it's because if we don't have that, our sort of theory is that without long-term soil health, which is going to take committed, intelligent, creative people, the system will just collapse and probably will no longer support the society that we would like to have. I think it's the UN says we have 60 years of topsoil left on the planet. So that is a hugely frightening statistic.
So we better get started.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for your time and your openness and your sharing. And I'll be sure to be checking in regularly with the vineyard, which is going to take a bit of time, but we're patient.
Yes.
To see how that's going, and also the tillage, of course, which I think are going to provide much earlier signs. First, probably in a sign of a hockey stick. First, a lot of stress on the land, and the soil doesn't know what's happening, but hopefully soon enough we'll take an upward path.
Yeah, we're a little worried because so far the soil seems to have responded really quickly, but we're expecting a moment when it does get confused. So that's what we're watching for, exactly. But yes, I'd love to stay in touch, and thank you for your work spreading the word of impact investing and regenerative ag.
You just listened to Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Agriculture as if the Planet Mattered, an interview with Sallie Calhoun, an experienced impact investor in regenerative agriculture. She has shared with us her first steps, her challenges and opportunities, and I hope to see you back soon for more of these interviews. If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you, and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much, and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course?
After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? And what questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space? For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, agtech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning, I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're gonna look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soil builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.